Yes. Hello. Yes, we're live. You're telling everyone we're live. You are? Okay. What is it you want to tell them about? What is it you want to say to everyone? That we're live? Do you want to tell them the reason that we're running late? Up. Go on. Up you come. Here we go. Up. Hello. Want to get up? Up. Good boy. Up we come. Alright. Hello everyone. Right. So apologies for running a bit late on the start. As you can see, I am joined by young Fluff. And he's out with me. He wasn't going to be out with me. He was going to be in with the family because the family's having a bit of an Easter. I can tell you a bit about that. Now, my little cousins might have wondered why I have gainfully eaten my sister's cooking and my aunt's dessert this evening. And my aunt cooked dessert. This is what I mean. Well, my mum, as bribery, bought 24 cans of Iron Brew and reminded me I was already taking the whole Easter weekend off any dieting, so I could just enjoy myself. Which is the entire bribery for me eating it all and not complaining. But I do have someone who has been complaining over the fact that everyone has taken over his sofa. They've taken over his sofa. It's terrible. His sofa, his sacred space, his sofa has been taken over by humans. And he was protesting this so much, I had to go get him and bring him out with me. So this is why we're running late. Because someone has taken over his sofa. Just terrible. Terrible. We had turkey. My sister doesn't eat lamb, so she won't cook it. She has too much affection for sheep, is what she says. Having tasted once her roasted lamb, I'm not upset. Hello, everyone. Hello, John Shea. Hello, George Newman. Hello, Mark Harkness. Hello, Byron Newman. Hello, Knight6831. You've got 24 questions. I haven't yet decided how many books we're going to do today, so we'll see if we can get through all your questions. Hello, Stafford. Hello, Wayne. Hello, DG40. Hello, Tanef. Hello, Seneca. Hello, Renan. Hello, Stephen Richards. Hello, well, History Vanguard. Hello, ooh. Book collection is being... you're moving house, so the book collection is being put in boxes about 500 down, 3,500 to go. Good luck. Yeah, that is the reason why I'm certain that Drac might never move. Because of moving the box, moving the book. Where are you trying to get to? You're trying to go somewhere. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You have to be cute and sit up here. You know, nicest way. If you want to get down, you are allowed to get down, but then you don't have to get back up again. Okay? No. Yeah. There are lots of various phraseologies, but the nicest one, you have enough 16-inch shells from Rodney raining down on you and 14-inch shells from King George V. The odds of you deciding your own fate is very, very small. Right, hello Michael Cooch, hello Abzowski, hello Tanif, hello John Shea, hello Melanie6040, hello Colin Cameron, hello Amelia, hello Yickers, hello Glyn Stewart. Hi Glyn, how are you doing? Hello Alistair Shaw, hello David Goulding, hello Carl. I think I said hello to Carl, but I'll say it again. Hello Paul from Chicago. Hello everyone. How are we all doing? Hello Bob Fry and Leslie. Alright. You've run an entire Savage Worlds campaign without finding your Savage Worlds physical book. That's pretty good, Bob. Glenn. That is pretty good and mighty scary. A 500ml bottle of Iron Brew in the UK probably costs about £1.50. I do realise my 24 cans that my mum got me probably cost her about £800. This is my Easter present. My Easter egg. And let's see, what have we got in here? Have we got a actual Yorkie chocolate bar? No, you're not getting a chocolate bar. Don't look at me like that. You're not getting a chocolate bar. I'm not killing my dog. Oh, it's got a Yorkie raisin. Raisin and biscuit Yorkie. And 2 original Yorkies. Right, they are going in the fridge. This should be okay behind me, but the others are going in the fridge. Yes, that's the Yorkie bar. I do have a Corgi backpack. There, if you go to my Instagram, you will see a video of me carrying the Corgi in the aforementioned Corgi backpack. 6 pints of milk. I fancy some milk. So, how is everyone today? How are we all doing? Turkeys are invading your front yard again. Renan, that sounds like they're getting ready for Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners already. It's a little bit early, but I'm sure you can, the right scenarios, if they're the right size, sort yourself out. I think, why do I find Hood taking a fatal golden battleship, golden... I don't really find it infuriating, that'd be the wrong word. Rather sod's law is what I would use to describe it. It's kind of a case of, if there is a worse moment and a worse time to get hit than this, you can't really think of one. It's just such a confluence of events. Let's put it this way. The odds of you getting that shot and being able to replicate that shot is like 1 in a million, probably higher than 1 in a million. So it's the impossible shot, and it gets pulled off. That's amazing. But it's also, for goodness sake, because it does lead to this. That leads to a whole lot of ideas about battle cruisers, especially as having glass jaws, and whilst to an extent that's accurate, it's also kind of overstated. Because the reality is, if she'd been hit in other places, she'd have tanked it. Yes, Glenn, we will see what we can do about you. A box of 1901 bottles and some gluten-free Bakewell tarts. Yes, we will see what we can get for you. Hello, Trisverdon. Given KMS Sadelets was 95 complete. Let's have a look at the Sadelets. Theoretically, but the reality is they never had the crew, the fuel, or the intention to really use her. So, yeah. She would have been more useful if she had been built. She could certainly have been a decent partner to Tirpitz, but let's be honest, the whole of the Hipper class are ill-fated. Actually, speaking of things, which we have going on, hello! Welcome to the Patreon vote, which, as we can say, is currently live. I'm just making sure it's refreshed. Let's see what votes we got in. We have 17 votes for Red Storm Rising. We have 8 votes for Italian forces and infrastructure in the Red Sea in 1940. What were the capabilities and plans of those forces? We have 9 votes for the RN keeps control of the Fleet Air Arm. How would that have changed the Royal Navy operations in World War II? So I have a feeling I know which 2 are going to win, but, you know, it's going to be interesting to see. And 7 votes for Michael 66 and the Age of Sail. And you're right, we have a few minutes until this is up. We have a few minutes. 2 minutes left. For anyone who wants to vote. 2 minutes left. Link not down below. Mention the Easter Bunny just delivers eggs. Every turkey here is prepared to give their lives for Thanksgiving. Oh, good Lord, don't go there. Hello. Nice one. How did Admiral Holland get so unlucky that everything that could go wrong does? And it... Sometimes life just happens, 9684. This is the problem. People like to put war and all these things down to a science. People like to put the human condition down to a science. And yeah, but there's a healthy dose of luck and humanity in there. And life happens because once you're dealing with the, you know, the joys of tides, currents, the vagaries of information received. Let's be honest, the whole problem with the Battle of Denmark Straits is there's not enough carriers. Okay, you could have done it with the ships you had available if you'd had another couple of carriers available. So honestly, you could say it's the loss of courageous and glorious. Iron War, you could say it's the pause in carrier construction. Because having only Victorious as the only carrier out is absurd. But also you need long-range maritime patrol aircraft from shore, probably, as well. You know, you need lots of things. Currently, if you hear me yelp at any point, that's because I have a Corgi currently, well, he's currently holding on to his favourite form of stress relief, which is my hand. Hey, children, a question on the Krupp Harvey armour again. How did procurement work? Was it a pay for it once deal or pay as you use deal, or did the British just follow standard procedure and nick it? Basically, you have to remember they're not the actual armour. They're sort of similar sort of process ideas. But the actual specifics of the armour are very different. So what we call Krupp style armour is different from Harvey style armour, but every army manufacturer produced their own slightly different variants of it. So, British. Hello. What's up? What's up? Oh. That bad? Okay. Alright. You can go for a wander. Go on. And I will have the door held open for you in the new-fashioned way we do. There you go. Right. That should keep the Corgi happy for a little bit. Oh. So basically, when I'm talking about different armor styles, we're talking about broad classifications. It's like modern tank armor. You know, we often talk about Chobham armor and these things, and those might actually be bought and used, but but sometimes, you know, sometimes it's just the style of the armor. So it's kind of the case of it makes it easier for us to group these armors in this, but they're not the same. And it gets even more interesting once you start talking with people who are going, well, the Navy uses the same designation for armor for this steel in 1910. They're still using the same steel in 1940. And you're going, no, that's not the same steel as the one which was used in 1910. They've changed the metallurgy a long way. in metallurgical terms since 1910. That steel is completely different steel, pretty much by 1940. They just use it as the same title because it's fulfilling the same functions as the original steel did. But it's been evolved and improved. So that causes even more fun, because there are people who will come through and you always see this on the internet, it's great fun. People who will come through and go, well, you know, they're using the same designation. You go, yeah, but it's not quite that story. It's not quite that history. And I know where you're getting this from, because you're reading these documents and that documents, and I know which historians you're reading, but those historians don't. It's one of the things I always say is learn the context. And I have a lot of this before I write stuff about navies which are not the navies I'm very much more familiar with, and by that I mean navies. When I'm not familiar with a navy, I go and talk to the engineers and the other historians around as much as I can before I start writing about it. Once I've written a few articles about it, received the feedback on it, then I'm more confident, and I might start articles about talking to those people and talking to that content. But yeah, often, the first thing you find is people going, well, yeah, everything that's said in this history book, it's a very popular history book and it makes a very good point, but just remember that those stats it's giving, they're fine, but they're not. They lack the context and nuance, because it's all given as the same steels or the same this, and it's not. And with the British Navy, once you go into the National Archives, you very soon realise that the metals change, because the properties of the metals in their performance in testing changes. So there is no way that it's the same metal in 1940 as it was in 1910, because suddenly, pound for pound, it's far better in almost every category. There is no way it is the same metal. I have a WhatsApp message I have not answered. I apologise, Glenn. Was it while I was in charge of 150 teenagers? Because in the nicest way, that was how I spent the first part of my Easter. How would history change if Hood, Golden BB, and Bismarck? She'd go into refit probably. Well, Rodney was already on the way out to the States. Hood might well also go to the States for her repair and refit. So both would get repaired and refitted. Who knows what would happen then? Nice one. With Drax's determination that the fatal shell that sank Hood arrived at the moment she began, doesn't that eliminate Nathan Okun's theory of penetration of the 7-inch belt? It certainly provides a very good argument against it, but I would say that until we have found the wreck and extensively examined it to the level we need to, and all of the wreck to extensively examine it, we can't rule anything out. So that's to say, I have to say personally, I find Drax's timeline and the other scenarios gone in and the amount of research very compelling. Far more compelling than I find the idea of the penetration of the 7-inch belt, but I'm not going to rule out one or the other because I do not have definitive evidence. And I would also say that compared to either of those two scenarios, two persons, I have not nearly studied it as much, because for me, it's always been more okay. Why was Bismarck and Hood in that scenario? Why did that scenario happen? How did that scenario, and then what was the impacts of that scenario on the wider war effort? So I am always looking at it more from an operational, strategic perspective. and knock-on and second and third order effects. That's more of my area of interest. So, to an extent, therefore, it doesn't matter how or how Hood is sunk for that analysis. The fact is, Hood is sunk, and that has the impact. And as I've said before, you can trace it all back to the loss of the carriers earlier in World War II. You can trace it all back to the carrier decision earlier in World War II. And I'm not talking about needing a mass carriers. The RN needs functionally for its operations to suddenly be dramatically different is about 2 carriers. Because if you think about it, if you have another carrier in the Mediterranean, which you would have done, backing up Illustrious and Eagle, Eagle would probably have been maintained rather than allowed to get to the problem where she did get. And that would have meant there would probably have been 3 carriers involved at Taranto. And 3 carrier strike groups involved at Taranto makes Taranto a very different affair than an overloaded single carrier strike group. And then that has a knock-on effect for the rest of the war, because if you've damaged the Italian Navy to the extent that 3 carrier strike groups would do, you then change all sorts of things in the Mediterranean, you change all sorts of things in Crete, in Greece, and all those scenarios. You have impact on what forces you have available for the North Atlantic, but you probably also have another carrier in the North Atlantic, because that's where probably the other Courageous class would be. So you might well have Victorious and, well, you probably have Glorious. It's probably the one sent to the Mediterranean, so you probably have Courageous with Victorious. So you'd have another carrier in that group. And then, in the nicest way, you have a very different scenario. Because you could well have, A, the Bismarck and Prince Eugen being shadowed by aircraft from much earlier in the sort of very early on. And B, they could have been torpedo strikes. So Bismarck could already have been hit by a torpedo. And if Bismarck's already been hit by a torpedo before Hood and Bismarck engage, then in the nicest way, what's Tovey going to do? Tovey might well bring, if he's got 2 carriers, he might A, launch other strikes, but B, he might go, she's been hit, she's slowed down, let's converge on her. And instead of you having it being Hood and Prince of Wales fighting Bismarck, it could be Hood, Prince of Wales, and King George V. You know, the scenario changes dramatically with just those extra couple of ships. I'm going to avoid the politics questions. Vote for mine on radio to hear Alex cuss at Churchill. What, Port of Chicago? Me cuss? That's, you know, rare I'd cuss. Okay, final results in. Because the vote is up. So we have... I'm not sure if we're going to be surprised about the winner. That's Red Storm Rising. But number 2 is the RN Keeps Control Fleet Air Arm. So I will probably flip those around and do Kyle's one this week, and Paul's will be done next week. Coming up. So, you know, because I think it'd be kind of interesting to do it that way, and also because that gives me more time to find my copy of Red Storm Rising, which is somewhere in my office. Ah. Someone did find a fox. The assistant fluffy research assistant, the Afra now. He's no longer training, he got promoted. Juicy Sushi does have strong feelings. Blackburn Maximus, hello.
Could you check on page 25 of Carrier Operation World War II by Dr. Brown? Apparently there is a part about barracudas using a ski ramp on HMS Furious to attack turpits with heavy bombs. That wouldn't be surprising to me because Furious already had a slightly orientated and weird deck. So yeah, I'd have to look up J.D. Brown's book. It's somewhere in here, somewhere. But yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Dean Richards, if you were Von Spare to Falklands, what would you do on scene of battle cruisers? Charge towards them. I have no chance of fighting them at range. I have no chance of outrunning them. Charge towards them. Tell everything else to run away. And charge towards them with my armoured cruisers. That's my only chance. I can't surrender. I'm Von Spee would never surrender, so it's charged towards them. Nice secretary for everyone. In the nicest way, you are. I can see where you're going from, but the question goes: if the Fleet Air Arm keeps control, if the RN keeps control of Fleet Air Arm, so you have to go back to 1918. In which case, the Blackburn Rock is not something you're killing because it's never going to appear. If you're going back to 1918, you're changing the entire scenario. So you have to completely forget the Blackburn Rock and all those things. The RAF doesn't function into it. The Royal Navy is now control their own aircraft construction completely. It's going to depend to an extent on the level of powers given to the Air Ministry, but considering the power of the Admiralty in the first place, they're not going to take any notice of them. Stern, what are your favourite ironclads? Oh, there's so many. Depends on the period you're talking about. Can depend on the even year. I have almost favourite ones of each year. And they're sort of coming out in the Key Ship series. You might have realised that it's been kind of ironclad heavy so far for the Key Ships. There's a reason for that. Medicine, would we have Hood preserved as museum ships? It depends if what she does and what she gets up to. Somewhat random thought. What would it have taken for Hood to have been refitted and complete as an aircraft carrier? A massive Sopwith Cuckoo strike in 1916. That was a devastating effective against the German fleet. So basically, if Jutland had involved a carrier strike, no. The thing is, we found 3 sections. So far, we have theoretically, we have in 2013, I think, was the last time, and we have fully explored with. We've explored it with more with remote control vehicles, but we have very little data about it. That's the sort of the problem. And how do I put this politely? Look, the hull and everything of her is in roughly 3 sections, and it's all buried at different angles, and we have about as much information about that wreck as we're going to get at the moment without someone spending a lot of money to go and investigate it properly. So, yeah.
And I think in Dr. Clarke's Equitable Washington scenario, you get the Admirals as carriers because of the G3s or some other sort of super Nelroads being built. It's tempting. St Mary's is good for history. University of Kent for military history is a decent one. King's for war studies and history is good. Have you looked at Birmingham for war studies and history? They're pretty good. And Plymouth and Portsmouth for history. Birmingham, King's, of course, Alessio Padalano is probably the gentleman you want to, and Marcus Faulkner are the two you want to talk about. For Birmingham, Jonathan Boff is the person you want to talk to. Maybe on the Battle of Red Cliffs. I never say no to these things. It's always a maybe. It's going to depend on the time. Interesting. If the R-Class was small boiler repeats of the Queen Elizabeth, it also might have made the Admirals more appealing carrier conversions. True. It would also change the entire scenario of the Admirals. It was also against Bismarck, the cruisers Norfolk and Suffolk. They were being held back when it would have been quite useful if they'd come in, because they could have distracted a fire from the other side and thrown things off. Blackburn Maximus. How much of a change in history would be if the Iron builds 4 sea control treaty carriers before the London Naval Treaty, using the under 10,000 tons? You might see a whole different category added in. They would probably add in a category limitation of ships under 10,000 tons, so you'd be allowed, like, maybe you'd be able to allow match numbers, so you'd be allowed how many ever carriers of up to 27,000 tons and how many of up to 10,000 tons. So it might be a case of you're allowed 10 of up to 10,000 tons and 5 of up to 27,000 tons. Or sort of, and it worked out on those sort of limitations of tonnage. So you're allowed 100,000 tons of escort carriers, or they might even, they could match it. Let's see, 27,000 tons times 5 is 135,000 tons. So they could make it 140,000 tons. You're allowed, and they could make it 140,000 tons for both. You're allowed 140,000 tons of fleet carrier and 140,000 tons of carry up to 10,000 tons, and then just seeing what they built. But that would have been had a massive impact on history, because if the Royal Navy has that many escort-stylish carriers in service in 1939, then you definitely don't have Courageous and Glorious out on their own, because if you think about it, you have that's what you have escort carriers for. For the dangerous missions, for the things you risk, and you suddenly increase their value. So you changed a lot of things. You also changed the whole air group scenario. Sidra90, how easily can SSK production be rebuilt if US or UK or US wished it? Not as easy as we'd might like to believe. It would be expensive, but it's doable, but it's expensive. Were there different ideas on how to refit the ship? Not really different ideas. There were differing values on how much to spend on it. Warspite got the premium upgrade. The rest got kind of cheaper upgrades. I think we're already there in Scare, but I don't think it's anything to do with censoring VPNs. I think that's more the fact that VPNs are useful for a lot more than just your average trying to get TV where you're not supposed to have it.
I do a lot of naval war gaming, and I tend, these days, to do, and please note, I am doing this to take the taste of dessert out of my mouth. I've tried iron brew, I've tried milk, I've tried everything. Nothing has got through and taken the taste of that dessert out of my mouth. I love my aunt dearly, but it's where my sister got her cooking abilities from. You have no idea. I can say that in front of family because everyone knows which aunt I'm talking about. Your lovely auntie, we love you dearly. You are wonderful, but please, it's nothing I haven't said to your face. The fact that a family which treats itself to desserts, enjoys desserts, left 75% of dessert tells the story. No. It's a case of on naval wargaming. I tend to at the moment use the Admiralty wargaming rules from their battle study guides, etc., that they produce in the interwar period, because I'm doing some sort of testing based on that. But when not, what were the ones we used at King's? I know them. I know them off by bloomin' heart, but I can't remember them. They have little blue ships on the cards. Oh, I can see it, but I cannot remember its name for the life of me. Don't get old, kids. Don't get old. I'll answer the questions and it'll probably come to me. Lions, which World War II Royal Navy capital ship do you wish there was a museum ship of? Okay, so let me put it this way. If I was answering for Jamie, it would be HMS Illustrious. It would be an armoured carrier. If I was answering from Drac, it would be HMS Warspite. And you can make brilliant cases for both of them. But this is me, and as we've been over many times, I am an absolute and unrepentant Renown class fanboy. So, if I had to pick, it's HMS Renown. Okay? There we go. I'll make sure the timestamps can. Why did the timestamps gone? Yes, so, you know, it would be a Renown for me. Renown. Because I am a Renown class fanboy. I do freely admit this. Renown is my favourite battlecruiser ever built. I think, honestly, they should have just kept churning out Renown-style battlecruisers, possibly with triple turrets, and never bother with the Admiral class, but we'll leave that to one side. Seriously, would they send Victorious out being a brand new carrier if it was another carrier available? Yes, they would have still. Because they'd have still needed the extra carrier. And if they're sending out Prince of Wales still, then they're going to be sending out Victorious, because Victorious is further along and far more viable than Prince of Wales. Was there any thought once the treaties had expired of re-engineering Nelson Rodney to gain speed, or was it a foregone conclusion newer ships would have been supplanted them? Pretty much the latter, especially if there are 16-inch armed ships. Going onward, Greek Cuckoos in Wilmsholm. Catastron got bombed several times by 50 to 60 4-engine Italian bombs in 19. Eventually knocked the base out as a fleet base. But they weren't a carrier-launched aircraft, so that's not going to have an effect on the carrier scenario. They're going to be considered big aircraft. What about the first aircraft carrier for key ships? planned. The first aircraft carrier for key ships I have already in the listing. I already have it planned, basically. First carrier coming out is going to be USS Enterprise, and then there's going to be Illustrious. So yeah, they're both coming up in the next series of key ships. Maybe John UK, probably. I'll have to check out the details on the Bismarck burning from stem to stern image and whether it's copyrighted, before I could do that. HMS New Zealand would be my choice from World War One. The History Vanguard. Don't get me wrong, New Zealand would be the choice from World War One. Mainly because I just think it should be amazing to have around. Hi, Steve Clarke. I'll ask, what happens to people of Ireland? To people of Ireland, should think about it. Without the Republic of Ireland, doesn't the whole Northern Ireland political system fall to bits? It becomes very, very interesting. Are there any military historians in other countries who have English YouTube channels? By that, well, there's military aviation. It was very good. If you're talking, I'm presuming you're speaking of countries which aren't English speaking but have English channels. There's a couple coming, but there's none I really know well enough or know about or know more than scant details of to be able to recommend. And that's me being honest, in that there's a couple I would love to recommend, but I've only ever watched one video there, so I would need to watch more and know a bit more about them before I did. And there's a couple of friends who I know are considering it, but haven't yet started it. Tanif, do you think the criticism of Admiral Fletcher for being too cautious at the Battle of East Sunderland was warranted? Not really. It's very easy in hindsight to criticise someone for being not too cautious. It's very difficult it's also very easy to criticise them for losing your entire fleet. But at the time, you do the best you can with the information you have available, and you try and go through, unless you're being completely reckless of people's lives on your command. It's very easy to be reckless, and very easy to throw caution to the wind when you don't know the people who are going to die, and you are doing it in hindsight with full knowledge of what was there. So Cameron, for a grouping of ships to use as the UK equivalent to Iowa during the Cold War, would Hood and possibly Repulse Renown have the space to refit to keep at Vanguard? No. Probably be the King George V which would get modified. If they're going to keep anyone around, it's going to be the King George V's. Stefano Mercosi. There is my Italian friend, but again, I'm not sure. If you're meaning my Italian friend, then we've got there's the Italian Naval History, Italian Military History Archives, which is excellent. I ate dessert because I was bribed with 24 cans of iron brew. The hope was if I ate it, that would encourage more others to eat it as well. This did not work. I'm now drinking as much iron brew and milk as I can in order to stop myself having issues.
Speaking of it, milk time. Oi, caramba. Oi vey. Oi vey. I have played the board game Sea Strike a long time ago, I think. Or hang on, no. Yes, I think so. Considering if I had some Truffaut and some strong cheese, I would be consuming it quickly. But one of the tastes which was, I believe it or not, think in the main meal, was mature cheddar. Not quite sure why, but we'll get to one side. Probably 96A from Blackburn. Maximus. During one of your videos on the Iron Heron colours, you mentioned about the gap between building them and caused a heavier turret when building a low-angle turret. How small does the gap between building ships of such size needed to maintain the skills to continue producing effective designs? It wasn't so much the gap. Well, the gap between building them. It wasn't sort of the gap. How do I put this? There was a large gap between the building of HMS York and HMS Exeter, to the point at which they're completely different ships, functionally. They're crews in the same class, but they're functionally different ships, so that's what I was talking about. The fact they end up with a heavier turret than the previous ones is not so much a gap as in that someone was designing a turret, and it was supposed to be lighter, and they end up making it heavier. That's the old joke about the turret. It goes from the first version of the of the 8-inch turret in the Royal Navy. And for those wondering, this was from the Corgi. It's tooth caught on my finger. The problem is, and the problem that becomes, is sort of one of the things that you are building a 8-inch turret. They build it first of all. It's got an AA capability. It can fire up to 70 degrees and all this thing. And that's actually really quite cool if you consider it. An 8-inch gun that can fire up to 70 degrees. But, yeah. Come along, there's the confirmation bias. And they want stabilizing, better targeting, better low angle, anti-ship engagement and all these things. And they want it to be lighter. And it is all those things, but it's no longer able to do 70 degrees, and it's definitely not lighter. It's the good idea theory, not so much a loss of skills, it's the good idea theory. It's not Blue Peter rules. Consider 90, would it be easy to preserve War Spider or Renown? Renown. Definitely Renown. Not even all the tribals left would have made up at the same tonnage as Renown, but it would be quite nice to have some more Renowns. I haven't found a decent model of HMS Renown to build yet. I still haven't finished Belfast because the new parts haven't arrived yet. Hello, Jack! Hope you enjoyed the escarpment. That, on the video of the war game, there's going to be announcements. There's all sorts of announcements coming this week. There's all sorts of stuff coming out this week. I'm told it's going to be this week. We've finally got everything sorted out. So, you could be having a lot of fun soon. No one put the Dazzle paint scheme with flames down the side of any hull. And it wouldn't have been Renown, it would be Rodney. Dalrymple or Hamilton, because anything which should have got him an extra knot, half knot. Let's be honest, If that man had managed to get extra half knot out of his ship, there would have been one sunk Gneisenau, for starters, and goodness knows what else would have happened in World War Two. I don't. Not really, because the trouble is, you know, please note, you have to be. Look, here's the classic thing you do with propaganda in any war. When you've got both sides, and both sides are giving out propaganda, what you do is you take the propaganda from both sides, and you find a point somewhere in the middle. And that's probably somewhere compared to the truth of what's going on. It won't be the truth, because it's an approximation, but the truth is probably closer to somewhere in the middle between the two extreme positions than it is on that distance. You can decide by which regime is more likely, and variants off the middle accordingly within that perspective. But in wars, you always have to expect propaganda. Now, with that in mind, the world is changing a bit. But as I was discussing, I think in yesterday's video, when I was talking about the impact of the American Civil War on all sorts of things going on in the world, how that change is fully going to be seen could be years from now. Because let's be honest, once you get ironclad turreted ships, you are automatically starting to head down the road which is going to take you to, first of all, sovereign style battleships. From the ironclads, you're going to go develop the ironclads up to the point at which you're then going to eventually get to sovereign style battleships and go through them, and then you're going to get the dreadnought style battleships. So what we're going to see in the first few years is going to not tell us where any of this stuff is going. Okay? So that's the thing. The American Civil War is a great war and a great point to pick for the emergence of ironclads, etc. But ironclads started to emerge before then. The thing is, it combines ironclads with turrets and all the other scenarios, technologies coming on, and the bigger, more powerful guns, and steam engines and everything else, and the world starts changing. And the moment you start on the change wheel, it will keep rolling and building up momentum until eventually it hits a natural plateau or stopping point. But it will keep rolling until it does. And we have no idea where it's going to end up. We really don't. Thank you, Funk. Original message changes little cousins. Thank you. Why Enterprise first, not Saratoga? From Steve Richards. Because honestly, if I do a Saratoga, if I do a Lexington class, I've got to be around to deal with the fallout of the people who aren't going to like me saying there's no point in the 8-inch guns. Okay? I have to be around to respond to them. Or at least in a space where I can respond to them around the timeline of it. Because, as I've said before, under the original naval treaty,
the first Washington Naval Treaty, there's no total limitation on the number of cruisers you can build. So there is no justification for building 8-inch guns onto your aircraft carrier instead of building an extra 8-inch cruiser, other than saving money and not being able to. And you could save so much weight and so much tonnage and build so much better aircraft carrier. It's really absurd. It's under the London Naval Treaty, where there is a cumulative limit placed on the total number of cruisers you can have, that suddenly those 8-inch guns start to make sense and start to have a small bearing, pretty much that lasts until about the second London Naval Treaty, when it ceases to have bearing, because by that point the technology has reached the point at which there is no way any cruiser should be getting that close to your carriers. And if it does, then a whole lot has gone frigging wrong. I need help finding the name of a report for Shane Greer's YouTube video history quiz for this week. It's a report that calls the Allied rethink of bombing strategy. Any help for where? To look would be appreciated. The trouble is, it's about 4 reports I can think of that caused the rejig in the strategy. So when and which one? I'd say look up something like, I don't know, a biography of Harris is probably best. Bomber Harris. I did get a package of new Lego parts. It turned out they didn't send enough. There are a couple other parts still missing, which I didn't realise, so I hadn't ordered them. So I'm now waiting for those 2 ones to appear. Do you think the larger reconstructed implacable house could have operated Gannet and Whirlwind together? Potentially. Mark Ernest, the flames painted on the hull make it go faster. And the science behind this, I am an admiral. That does work. Look, can we stop imagining HMS Rodney as some kind of orc war machine? Because I know painting the colours and the colours for the orc things make things go faster, make them invisible, etc. But I get freaked out at the idea of Rodney with a crew of orcs, because honestly, if she had, I'm fairly sure they would be running the world by now. The problem with going middle course is you end up with a situation like the Mark. No, this is advice and rough guidance for trying to figure out propaganda when you have both sides of the war reporting stuff. I'm pretty sure HMS Warrior would like a world with all the people that call not a real ironclad. Jackie Fisher was a gun reel at the time, and they might also fight you. Yeah, she was an ironclad. Then we had Lisa with a decades-long Rangam hype on top of technology. Yes, well, as I was talking about with the Scorpion yesterday, she is an ironclad monitor ram. So technically, a steam ironclad monitor ram. Yeah. Try saying that 5 times fast. If you were designing a new forward aviation support ship for modern aircraft carriers, what would you do? It depends. If you're doing a Cadabar carrier, you're limited. There's modern Cadabar carriers. If you're doing a Stovall carrier, I like like the Queen Elizabeth class, that's the sort of your air group. You could go for something of the 30,000 ton range and make something fairly decent. Unicorn-esque, basically. But the 18-inch guns will be perfect for when you wish to close the gun range and shell the enemy port you are attacking. Much as a target while you cycle the aircraft. Brilliant idea. Melanie, please. That hurts my soul. That kills a little part inside me every time I read it. Hello, Anuk, and Paul from Chicago. I'm not even reading. I've read out Melanie, so I'm not falling for that one. What would happen if Jackie Fisher was the first SEAL of today's Royal Navy? We'd have a far larger Royal Navy, and probably the RAF and Army would be worried about about having themselves taken over. Peter Dawson, whatever HMS Formidable says, she should not have been anywhere near the firing line. She, in the nicest way, everyone was ordering her out. When the Admiral himself has to get on the frigating radio and get messages directly sent, and is actually physically issuing the order himself, it's gone too far, okay? If the Implacable carriers were reconstructed, they'd have probably done the same deployments to Korea, etc., and the other stuff around the world they'd done, and they probably have lasted, well, they'd probably retired about the same time the Audacious class did. Maybe a little earlier. That's for sure. What do you mean already is an Orc machine? Darrell Hammond said, Darrell Hammond thought make it go faster, and that worked. It's quite disturbing. By sheer force of will, he made it. Technically, it is an Orc machine, because by sheer force of will, it made it go faster. It's like, I was having a conversation last week with the RS teacher, because we had RS revision going on. And the RS teacher was going, basically going through the various forms of, faith, etc. And I, of course, said, well, there's the machine god. It's true. And he went, no, what do you mean? I went, in the nicest way, have you heard the story of HMS Warspite in all her various forms? He went, you could explain all this fact. I said, yes, but all that happening in one name, that is definitely a machine spirit, and ergo there is a machine god. The Omnissiah is true. What's the difference between RM Model 2 sailors, 1980s British soccer hooligans, and orcs? There are many interesting points there. So, Rodney is vulnerable by dwarves who speak in a Scottish accent. Potentially. My coach, if Rodney isn't crewed by orcs, what race should crew her? We'll keep it to humans, just for them to be on the safe side. Blackman, Dreadnought, Maximus. In your Dreadnought video, you gave a theory about a super firing 14-inch guns version. If that design was oil-fired boilers instead of coal, how fast could it go, and could they build for them? If they'd had oil-fired boilers at the time, it could probably have achieved 20. Well, if you consider the boilers, it could have probably 23, 24 knots. If you're probably doing a 24-knot ship with 14-inch guns. It would have been interesting, and they could have built 4 of them, yes. They're all new. The sheer number of yards. Here's the thing. Britain actually has yards which are capable of building battleships go bankrupt during the naval race with Germany. Because they aren't ordering enough battleships. Mull that over. In the 1900s, when apparently Britain is spending so much money 1900s, 1910s, so much money on its defence. It's terrible, it's terrible, it's draining the economy, and people go, if Britain can't afford to do anything more than it's doing, it is still not spending enough money to keep all the yards that actually can build battleships open. Which suggests it isn't spending that much money, reality. It's not. Someone, they were from big aircraft guns on aircraft carriers. Someone would try to use them. Yeah. No, sorry, they're not even big guns on Formidable. Please note, they're not big guns. They are just standard anti-aircraft guns. Okay, they are standard guns you fit for AA defense. Actually, it's difficult not to portray HMS Rodney as being piloted by Hawks. To be honest, this is very in character for her and Warspite. Possibly a guard commissar in the tank as well, wanting to hit them with your sword. Potentially. Johnny Kate, Reddit claimed that immunity board Graf Spade was the reason Langsdorff saddled her, rather than the fuel processing plant being destroyed in a battle plate. What truth is there in this? People will turn to any story they can to try and claim these things, but no. There might have been... there are differing complaints about whether or not there was a mutiny aboard, but honestly, I doubt there really was, because there's not really enough crew left for there to be a mutiny. There might be people going, huh? But there's a lot of injured, but also, in a nice way, it's not the fuel processing plant which is the problem, it's the water processing plant. Both of those are gone, damaged after the River Plate. Without them repaired, there's no chance for her getting at sea. No chance for her getting anywhere, really. Colin Cameron, thank you, Dad. And one of the things, I'm not sure if I say this enough, thanks for the super chats and the memberships. Because I occasionally go and check through my finances. You know, I talk about having an accountant quite regularly, because one of the things about being... One of the problems with being an academic, and especially many young academics, they try and do everything. One of the things I've learned is, because of my dyslexia, and this is something that is A, to ask for help, and B, to realise where my skills and where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. And one of my weaknesses is that when it comes to making sure I have the forms filled out correctly for tax, etc., I get very, very worried about it. And it's better if I have someone who's an expert looking. So I have an accountant. Looking for her, talking for him, she went... she was working through my family. You do realise that now 25% of your yearly income is down to super chats and YouTube memberships. So thank you for all the super chats and thank you for all the memberships, because that's 25% of my yearly income apparently. Or rather, my spendable yearly income, I think, is the actual phrase she used. Colin Cameron, speaking of the... just imagine the number of books which I wouldn't have without it is basically the idea. I want to say thank you very much. The things I wouldn't be able to do without that is massive. But, yeah. Doc speaking, the 8-inch gun in Saratoga, what do you think would have happened to her if Draxner had the first carrier-on-carrier fight being a gun-to-gun night fight during the Indian Ocean raid happens? She might have kept her 8-inch guns. Because suddenly there's a reason for them. So that carriers can fight other carriers. If Rodney had had the Enterprise helmsman against Bismarck, would have been better. Doubtful for Bismarck. June, thanks. I think I found the name of the report. Been finding quotes from it for 2 days, but nothing included the name of the report in which I could access. Ah. So which primate was Warspite reenacted as? You need to ask on that question? Okay. Let's look it up. Let's consider Warspite. Now, obviously, it's going to be one of the loyal Primarchs, because there is no way Warspite falls to the side of Chaos. However... she completely ignores anyone else's commands, does exactly what she wants whenever she wants, and basically charges into battle at high speed and doesn't understand about the whole idea of not getting close. I'm sorry, HMS Warspite, if she's a Primarch, is Jagadai Khan. There is just no other option. I'd love to say Rus, I'd love to say other ones, but, you know, no. Warspite is Jagadai Khan. Because she's loyal to the bitter end, but goes her own way, and you can't always rely on her following orders. Because Enterprise... Well, mainly because I like Enterprise more than Yorktown. Honestly, this is the joy of doing the Keyship series. It's basically, the answer to most of these answers is, because I like it more. I might well be going to do Yorktown and Saratoga as well. I think I probably will do at some point. There's going to be about 4 or 5 series of Keyships. Bullshit. I was doing math last week. World War I cost Britain a squadron and a half of R-class battleships a day, and that doesn't include opportunity cost. Yeah, that's what costs a lot of money. Not that the arms race doesn't cost the British a lot of money. It's the war that costs a lot of money. We're actually spending a little bit more in the arms race to win the arms race a little bit earlier and take the stress off the Anglo-German relationship a little bit earlier and maybe push it over. And that could have saved things. Let's be honest. If Dreadnought had been, if they had built 4, preferably 9 Dreadnoughts straight off the bat, and they had been the 14-inch gun super firing versions with, let's say, oil-fired boilers, as was discussed earlier, capable of 24 knots, the odds are the world changes a lot. The odds are the world takes a lot longer to catch up. Because as I said when I mentioned it, you know, the thing is, the Germans can say, well, our 11-inch gun is more powerful than your 12, is equivalent to your 12-inch because our guns are more powerful for their size. But you can't turn around and go, our 11-inch matches in against your 14-inch. Our 11-inch, yeah, our 11-inch is as good as your 14-inch. It just isn't going to work. There's people might believe the fudge between 11 and 12-inch because they're close enough. But 11 and 14-inch and they're going to go, yeah. And I'm not going to say I'm the Queen of Sheba. No. And I am the Queen of Sheba's pallbearer. Yeah. It just doesn't add up. Blackburn Maximus. Super Dreadnought class names. Dreadnought, Devastation, Destruction, and HMS Daring. Yeah. Honestly, myself, well, Duncan's already in use at the time, sad enough, but I want the I'd want a Duncan, I'd want a Delight, I'd want a Dauntless, I'd want a Daedalus, and I'd be tempted to have a Damocles as well. That's my 9th one. If the Hood subclass variant of the Royal Sovereign class pre-dreadnoughts may really transition between the Ironclad battleship and pre-dreadnought battleships. I'd say the Royal Sovereigns are the transitions. That's why I don't call them pre-dreads. I call them Sovereign class battleships. Sovereign battleships rather than pre-dreadnoughts, because the nicest way, I don't like the definition of a pre-dreadnought, which is basically the battleships which are ironclads but before dreadnought. Well, as the dreadnought comes at the end, you can't really call them dreadnought because none of them are built as pre-dreadnoughts. None of those know dreadnoughts coming. No one knows dreadnoughts coming, so they call them sovereign battleships, which is what they are. Juicy Sushi, if a shipyards are going bankrupt during the naval arms race, that's probably a sign of acute overcapacity. Essentially a shipyard bubble, which is pretty weird. During an arms race, there are actual arms manufacturers going bankrupt, yeah. Blackburn Western. Could the Thames Iron Works, a shipbuilding company, have been saved in Canada in 1911 if Canada in 1911 had ordered a couple of light cruiser destroyers from or larger ships needed for it to survive? The smaller ships could have kept them going for another year. Larger ships could have kept them going for 4 or 5 years. At least possibly could have gotten them into World War Two, World War One. I mean, at least. Only 64. Have you got a PayPal symbol set up so people can send you pounds without Google gobbling up a third of it or money? If so, made sure people are aware of it. Yeah, I do have that. That's a link up above somewhere. Up here, there is a PayPal link. I tend to get told off. Let's put it this way: there are the various members of my family and my colleagues who remind me how much work I do and how much I am dependent upon this, especially with probably shouldn't have said that one, with the various universities and the various issues I've had with university pay. The various universities I work for. Might have to delete that bit out of the video in a bit later. Okay. 1:15. There might be a minute disappearing. No. It's a case of I have to be very. I should be more pushy and I should be more advertised. You can support me by doing this. But that's not really my style. If I had my way and I had the finances I should do for the work I would do, I would run it kind of like Wolf Lord Rowe does, but I think basically everything gets there's people send gift vouchers to him, and that's how he runs it, just off gift vouchers, and I just gift vouchers and advertising, I presume, and yeah, that would be because I like doing this. When I set up the channel and all the stuff I do, I didn't set it up to earn money. I set it up because I want to engage and share naval history and basically spread the love of naval history. And the fact that it has turned into what it has done, which is such a viable support for the work I do, is amazing and is something I'm eternally thankful for. But it's going to sound strange, it's not the reason I do it. It's the reason I do it is because I love to share naval history. Thank you, Tanner, for being a member for 8 months. I'm not sure if I've said that already. I suspect the responsible calculus for 5% income is if you can crowdfund this, and unfortunately you ignore it. But maybe except for Professor Lambert, who would crowdfund the ship, probably crowdfund the Shipple line. Do not joke about that. Do not joke about that one. He was talking about it the other week. Not to me, but one of my colleagues another colleague who works with him said, you do realise he was talking about how this could be, based on your model, it could be possible for him to actually get one built. And I'm going, I'm hoping you're winding me up because that if he starts a YouTube channel, that's both me and Drac out of work. That's just gone. They're gone, you know. My sister thinks, well, I would remind you that in your scenario, the entire country's population has disappeared. So, let's put it this way. Is a country still a country if it has no population left? That's that's an honest question. Is a country still a country? It just becomes a landmass at that point. If the population is all gone, if there's no one there, then everything's gone. And then probably its nearest neighbour, and the only one it shares land border with, will take it over, presumably to stop others moving in. Because if you just leave it empty land, then people like Al Qaeda, etc., and those sort of organisations can set up there. You're not going to do that. So it's not a case of whether they'd want to join the UK. If the entire population of Ireland, as you postulated in that question, disappears,
if the entire population disappears, then there are likely confluence of events which are going to happen as a result of that disappearance. It's a very unlikely circumstance, but if it happens, there will be the likely consequences are quite easy to work out. Zero Richards, my wife would like to know, what did you have for dessert? I will say it started out life potentially being intended to be a form of cheesecake. I'm not sure what it ended up as, but it started out life as a cheesecake, intended to be a cheesecake, I think. Doc, Rodney is Rusty Executioner. No, I can see why, but I'd say Rodney is more Gilliman. Surprisingly fast, but methodical. Masses of damage. I would say if anyone's more Russ, if we're sticking with British capital ships, I'd say that's more likely Renown, because, and I have a reason for that. Renown is always going around hunting, and you can always rely on her to turn up to hunt someone, and never back down. For example, outnumbered 2-1. Hello, my friends! I come to bring you the joy of 15-inch gunfire. Please stay for me to give you my love. Scharnhorst nice now going, we want to be anywhere but near that number. Okay, that ship's not normal. We're leaving high speed. Get away. Stay away. That ship's weird. That ship is weird. I want to be away from this scenario. Away. I'm taking damage. I'm not stopping for you, sister. I'm just carrying on. That is a very weird ship chasing us. Just keep going as fast as you can. I'm taking damage. Keep going. You know, that it's Renown, which is Russ. I don't think. So Clarke, how useless ships to follow key ships? Might be doing those in about do those at some point. Amira, would Fisher love fast battleships like Oa? He would be obsessed over them, because that would be his dream idea. It's his ultimate dream. Really, it's a fast battleship, not a battlecruiser or a dreadnought. It's a fast battleship. No, the crew did not fill out requests to paint the ship red for HMS Rodney. Why were fighting tops still in use by the early Royal Sovereign pre-dreadnoughts? Think about it. The Royal Sovereign, Royal Sovereigns and Sovereign Star battleships. Think about it. What do you still have at that point? What are you dependent upon? Still, do you have radar? Do you have anything else? No. You still dependent upon the Mach 1 eyeball for all your aerial knowledge. So, yeah, you're going to still have high positions that people can go up to, can look out. Vision 14-inch armed HMS Daisy. Desert. Delight is actually quite... If you look up the history of HMS Delight in the Royal Navy, it's quite an interesting name. There has been, in 1583, a discovery vessel, which was wrecked off Sable Island. In 1686, the 4-gun Hoy. 1709, a 14th gun 6 rate. In 1778, a 14-gun sloop. In 1801, an 18-gun sloop, which was formerly the French corvette the Sans Pareil, which was captured by HMS Mercury. In 1806, a 16-gun brig sloop. HMS and then she was another Delight. Then it was another 16-gun brig, and then it was a 10-gun brig sloop, and then a 10-gun Cherokee class brig sloop, and then a Albacore class gunboat, and then a 8D class destroyer launched in 1932, sunk in 1940, and then of course was a Daring class destroyer launched in 1950.
which originally was going to be named HMS Disdain, but they decided Delight was better. Sold in 1970. So yeah, Delight has some history in the Royal Navy. Actually, why maybe a video on why sovereigns are the starting point for repeater editors? That might be coming up sooner than you think. Because looking through my list of Key Ship Series 1, which is what we're currently working through. Now, the Key Ship Series 1 ends on... We still have, I think, of course, Scorpions come out. We have Huascar to come. We have USS New Ironsides. And we have HMS Repulse of 1892, which is a Royal Sovereign class. And we also have HMS Renown of 1895. So, Renown and Repulse are both going to be covered in this series. Repulse might be me going to get into my Royal Sovereign class battleship design and explain why it's Royal Sovereign class battleships. But it's going to be under HMS Repulse. Actually, if you were in charge of GCSE and A-level history, would you get rid of exams or would you do 50-50 coursework exams? Honestly, I'd probably allow the students to choose. And I would have it as a case of you can do 30% would be based on an exam guarantee minimum, 30% based in coursework minimum. So you've got a third, and the remaining 40% can be an exam or it can be coursework depending on which module you pick and which one you prefer to do. And that would work for me. Or we could make it 25-25. So you could make it 50-50 if you wanted, or you could do 75 coursework and 25 exams. I think the history A-level and GCSE systems are already, the modules are so mixed up that you could make it so that you could pick which way you wanted to go. Excellent. Sovereigns are the question. Don't a lot of people think the Majestics are the starting point? I picked the Sovereigns. And I will explain this in the video of HMS Repulse coming up. And does none of my universities have any policies about faculty in YouTube or other media? Not that they've told on me, anyway. That all the Australia stuff the Australia stuff is coming soon. It's going to come soon. It's going to be coming soon, and it is going to be it will be crowdfunding, but we are setting up a whole sorts of special things, and that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long, and we keep thinking it's going to be ready to come out, and it takes long because we have to check things to make sure everything's perfect, but it's going to be out soon. It's going to be out very soon. And that's especially important for me, I have to admit, if I'm being very egotistical over it, but also because of the finances on my situation. It's very important for me we do these things soon. So why do people like to push the narrative that Britain cannot afford to run its carriers and can't defend a properly equipped? Couldn't really need an upgrade of 70 Erica 30-ish SAM with 3 20mm Gatling guns and... Okay, look, there's just so many narratives about modern Royal Navy ships. I personally would prefer at least a third aircraft carrier or a couple of LHDs, maybe 3 LHDs with ski ramps on them, to replace Albion, Bulwark, and Ocean eventually. And as well sort of Argus, so you ended up with 5 flight decks replacing what is basically 6 flight decks, and you end up with 3 well decks replacing 2 well decks, and to an extent also Lark's Bay, which was sold, and it's become HMAS Shul. I would like this because I think it'd be better for Britain's deterrent capabilities, but and I can even explain the funding system and how you can fund it, and why it's viable, and why it's necessary. But the thing is, you have to remember all these things take place in a current context. And again, one of the messy things of a political system and a democratic political system is people have competing views on what should be funded. And sometimes if they can't make a positive case for why their things should be funded, they make a negative case against things which are funded. So, an easy way to say, well, we shouldn't put any more money into this because it's not already viable. It's not viable as it is, so therefore we shouldn't put any more money into it. So I'm always careful about that. I would also say with the aircraft carriers, Queen Elizabeth class, would I like them to have Sea Scepter? Yes. Why? Because I think with the system the Sea Scepter uses to launch, the cold launch system, etc., I think it would be very sensible and would add another layer of their defense, because at the moment we don't have enough escorts. But if you ask me if I had to pick between building Sea Scepter or if we could get maybe some more Type 31s built, so that we would have 12 Type 31s and 12 Type 26s and maybe 12 Daring replacements, and we could therefore guarantee pretty much have 2 to 3, two of each of those vessels with each carrier group as a guaranteed minimum force, I would probably go, that'll do fine, thank you very much, rather than fitting it onto the carrier. Because then what you would do is you'd have a Type 31 with the carrier as a goalkeeper, a flak frigate, as I describe them as regularly, because that's what they're built as. You'd have another flak frigate sitting with the auxiliaries to make sure they're okay. You'd have the 2 Type 26s out hunting submarines and providing an inner layer of air defense. And you'd have the Type 45s, one of them sitting in the middle of the task group, or destroyer replacements, or Type 83 sitting in the middle of the task group providing air defense of the task group, and one as forward picket. And yeah, then you can slot in others around it to give you extra strength, but that's going to be a fairly viable group. But the reality is you have to be careful with what is said. And you have to realise that most things are not produced in a vacuum. There's context and nuance. But that doesn't mean also it's not worth listening to. Because there is the fact that even people who are talking from perhaps the most biased or outlandish perspective can also hit upon something which is worthwhile considering. So it's still worthwhile listening and looking at it. And I do agree, in the nicest way. If I have to pick between building the extra escorts or putting the missiles on the carrier, I'm going to build the extra escorts. But if I can't have the extra escorts and you'll give me the money for the extra missiles on the carrier, I'll take the missiles on the carrier. Steve Clarke, I don't want to answer that question because if I answer that question, it might actually put it into public being. The thing is, if I say those words together in one sentence and one pronouncement, that could produce something weird. I have no idea what weird, but I'm fairly certain that's a curse. Take care, Glenn. Night-night. Blackman Maxon, how much, with the other stretch trip, how much crowdfunding for you and Drac to play Azure Lane for now? We haven't included that yet, but you're more than welcome to suggest it. But if I'm playing Azure Lane for an hour, having not looked at it yet, I will require probably Iron Brew. I might even just forgo the whole pleasure of drinking it and just set up a drip.
Yeah, basically there's a reason I've crossed off the month of June. But if it's outside June, Verdun, and if it is outside June, if I can be there, I'm happy to be there. Barring work commitments outside June, I'm usually wandering around. But at the moment, June, you can basically blank it off. Because June is, yeah. I asked Dractus as model fond of child in UAD and find a battle to fight her in. It would be the earliest ones, but you could probably do that. Ask me on Friday, because I'm going to be doing UAD on Friday on Twitch stream again. And if you remind me on Friday's Twitch stream, I will do it. So that's a promise from me now. If you remind me of that question on Friday's Twitch stream, I will model HMS Thunderchild, and I will build her, and I will try and fight her. And I will do it live on Twitch. PBGBR. Alex, I know couldn't videos on HS Starling with Johnny Walker's submarine chasers. Yes, I do have a whole load of video ideas about Flower class corvettes, but I'd like to add Flower class corvettes and Black Swans class sloops, but I'd like to get the Flower class corvette book written first before I start those videos. So that book is almost done. I've got about 5 pieces of writing I'm doing at the moment, which I am fussing over and making perfectionist. One of them is for Glyn. And I'm going to apologise now because I'm being an absolute perfectionist sod over it. And it's not got... I haven't sent it to him yet because I'm not happy with it. But I'm getting there. I'm always happy with it. So it's going to go to him soon. And the other one... the other 4 are the 4 books I'm writing as short books, which are going to be published on Kindle. It's the Flower class, U class, the submarines. It's Admiral Jellicoe as 3rd Sea Lord. And it's one of the directors of Naval Construction, not Stanley Goodall. So that's basically it. And that's the 4 I'm writing and putting together at the moment. But it's a case of... It's time. Because each one of those books is roughly 45,000 words. They're going to be... Basically, I'm titling the series as a quick introduction to. Or rather, an introduction to. And so that's cumulatively is roughly 180,000 words, which is basically my twice my PhD thesis, which I took 4 years to write, and I'm trying to write these in less than a year, less than 6 months. Probably it's going to be about a year in the end. The British government has not yet got enough F-35s of both carriers. That's not the aircraft carrier's fault. That's the British government, and that's not even the F-35's fault. That's the British government's procurement plan for the F-35. So that's the problem there. It's potential if there was some sensible banking practices, but you have to remember with banking practices, that is part of that is regulation. Part of that is always going to be regulation because there's a lot of money in pushing the envelope in banking. That's one of the scenarios I was talking about earlier on Twitch when I was talking about government, what government exists for, and what part of the reason why you have a centralized government is, you know, it's to ameliorate, to allow the collective will to ameliorate some of the worst excesses of the individual will, and it's to find a sort of common ground for the things we need. And the things we need to do, and that's where, you know, I'm one of those people who I freely admit, a traditional-ish style of conservative, in that I believe you shouldn't, as my fundamental point to politics is that you should not use ideology to make a decision. You should look at the facts, not care where the idea comes from in terms of whether it's left-wing or right-wing. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the best solution, i.e. the best solution for the problem. And best solution, I mean the one that's going to give
the best result for the country as a whole. Now, this puts me at odds with a lot of people in modern politics. I do admit that. And I'm not going to get too far into politics because that's not what this video is about. It's about naval history. But it's a case of when you're looking at things like the F-35 procurement program and all those things, etc., that's government decision. When you're talking about banking regulation and banking decisions, those are government decisions. And yes, there are advantages and disadvantages to it, but sometimes you have to design a system that has the right checks and balances in it to deal with people who might not be listening to their better angels. Okay? And I know it's a dirty word in some parts of the world, but sometimes government regulation is necessary, and you do need stronger government. That sounds, to many people in this world, and many people who are listening, it's probably that sounds, what? But yeah, there are some areas where you want government to be strong in, and there are some areas where you don't want government, and you don't need government to be strong in. Personally, myself, health and safety, banking regulation, all these things are things which I prefer government to be quite strong in. In terms of banking regulation, I like, because despite my political inclination of being that, I would say my assessment is there should be not just what's called a paper wall, or a Chinese wall sometimes, etc., between investment and savings sections of a bank. I think they should be separate institutions and should be kept far apart, and should not be allowed to be owned by the same people. They should be separate banks. It's completely separate entities. So that the money which you and I put our money, the money which we invest in our savings account or in our current account, is a completely different form of bank to the investment merchant banks. Now, that's not because I hate capitalism or anything like that. It's just in my mind, it makes more sense because those two organizations have completely different emphasis. One is taking risks to make a lot of money. One is a risk-taking organization. One should not be a risk-taking organization. And if we consider it, for many, many years, the standard was they were kept very separate. This was a lesson of the 1920s. The full crashes, etc. Then, from that point onwards, they were kept very separate. It was an early lesson in capitalism. You needed to keep those two organizations separate. And then from the 1990s onwards, people let them get closer and closer and closer. Until eventually it's just a case of, yeah, they're in the same bracket. Yeah, that's when you get problems. And it's a case of, learn your history, please. It appears, according to your statement, both Warspite and Renown came on a reconstruction warship version of Dirty Harry, saying, "Go ahead and make my day." And then Ian going, "No, not Dirty Harry. It's Britain. It's come on if you think you're hard enough. Come on." That's what the British say. They basically roll up in front of them and go, "Come on if you think you're hard enough. You think you're hard enough to come on. Come on! You can." Oh, we're still working on Type 83 paper. It's getting better. It's getting bigger, though. Thanks, Verdon. Tom said, "I got a crazy idea of playing UAD with the crazy possibility for it. If some naturally feathered Avarov with turbines doing 28 knots, modern AA fire control and updated guns, what would the RN do? Use her as an escort somewhere.
probably should be wandering around the middle. Probably she would be useful in somewhere, I don't know, in maybe in the North Atlantic, maybe in the Indian Ocean, probably in the Indian Ocean. Because let's be honest, that'd be a fairly useful thing to have wandering around, protecting convoys from surface raiders. Twitch channel is in that should be in the links up the top, but again, it's Dr. Alex Clarke and on Twitch, as Steve Clarke's just put. Listen, if Queen Elizabeth class carriers hadn't been the victim of all the government issues, how likely is it that British aircraft Harrier 2 would be in use in the F-35 the F-35 get delayed? Probably. It makes sense to have kept them going. Comes a working feedback loop and weighting the short in your term and medium and long, not your next term but your child's term, consequences. We can all hope. Hi, Costros. Costros, we got rid of those regulations a while ago and the ending of the Glass Seagull in the US. Yep. So, Clarke, okay, a more serious question. With Batu, with Captain Gilbert Roberts and his Wrens, versus Johnny Walker, who's more influential in the Battle Atlantic. And would you do a video on both? On why? I'd do a video on both of them, and I'm planning videos on both of them. And I would say both are equally influential in their own ways. I would say Walker in providing a hero to live up to, but Iwatu and Captain Gilbert Roberts in terms of providing some actual working responses to the situation which we're facing. And yeah, it was interesting, to say the least. It was very interesting. And like adopting a too big to fail philosophy is too risky for small investment. Well, it's also caused the issue, if you think about it with the bank bailouts, you shouldn't actually do bailouts under a sort of capitalist system. They shouldn't be big and so big you have to. And if you have, the thing is, if you didn't have those investment banks linked to the savings banks, you wouldn't have to. If you think about that, linking those two together is what causes, because if the investors lost their money, yeah, a lot of people would be very annoyed. It would cause lots of troubles in the market, but ultimately the government will not be facing political ramifications. But because the number of investors is far smaller, and to an extent they accept that they are gambling on the stock market. The stock market is a form of gambling. Please note, it's a form of gambling. It's an acceptable form. It can be a very lucrative form. But it is a form of gambling. It's reading information and it's taking a punt with your money. And stocks can go up or down. So it is a form of gambling. But you have that, you can afford if you banks to siphon off as investment banks versus savings banks, they can fail. But the moment they're your savings and investment, they can't. The British government can't allow Bank of Scotland, NatWest to fail. There's too many people's mortgages connected to it. There's too many savers connected to it. You cannot allow that organisation to fail. It will cause too much damage to the wider economy, to the public, and will destroy the government in political terms. So they have to save it. And to an extent, banks know this. They know they've put themselves to a level at which they can ignore what governments want. So the British proceeded with the idea of the British Hovercraft Corporation SRN-6 missile hovercraft. Where do you see such a weapon being useful? Littorals.
And there's a few interesting ideas where you could use a missile-armed hovercraft. Basically, have you ever seen Tiberian Sun? Just think about what you got up to with the missile-armed hovercraft and that, and then work out and then go with the fun. So, no, could you make a turreted sailing ship modern materials and maths? Theoretically, but why would you want to? Wayne's World of Science. Just imagine the fun Daryl Hampton could have gone up to with a third more installed power. Well, let's put it this way. If you'd had a third shaft and the engine installed for it, there is no way that A, Gneisenau gets away, so that changes World War II dead off, if Gneisenau's sunk early, and B, as said, if you have a third more power on Nelson and Rodney, then the odds are Nelson and Rodney are taking part, Nelson or Rodney is taking part in the Battle of Denmark Straits. Because they're some of your extra fast battleships. So it might not be Rodney, it might be Nelson, it's going to be one of the two, will be probably there. So, bail out the customers on deposit. You might want to try that, but then think about the mechanism of how you're going to do that. It's far easier to bail out the bank, because then you're bailing out one person, you're dealing with one organisation. You're not think about it from a paperwork and actual bureaucratic logistics perspective. And also, if the bank fails, and this is the thing, if your bank fails with your current account, your savings account, how are you going to pay your bills? You have to change everything. Think about it. If all your money and savings are gone, if everything is gone, think about the time it's going to take to fix that and get that sorted out, even if the government is prepared to give you the money back, and think about all the repercussions that could happen in that time. Think about how many bills could be missed, and then think about the people who maybe aren't technologically savvy, who don't have the internet access and internet capabilities to actually do the stuff online and have to do it in person, and think about all the people who would be affected. It becomes a nightmare for any government to deal with. So this is why you have this problem. I would agree to an extent Juicy Sushi, but there's other scenarios going. Blackburn Maximus. Couldn't mind-laying tubes of World War II submarines be modified or for launching rockets in Shelbourne Moment? Say for surprise 9 detectors against soft targets, all referring to factory sex. No, but what they normally did was they stuck rocket systems on the back. That's where most of the early rocket launching submarines come from. To an extent, Mr. Serendi's end. See what I re-Watu. It would be interesting if Naval gamers could recreate the rules that the team used to run their simulations. But I don't know where to start. National Archives. But also there is the Western Approaches Museum in Liverpool, who has some interesting stuff there. I keep playing the various forms of Total War. Speaking of which, the decisions are going to have to be made this week of whether or not you want me to buy the remastered version of Rome Total War, which has just come out, or want to keep with the original version of Rome Total War, which I was planning on playing. If you want to get it remastered, I can do. I will find £25 and treat myself to it. Sure, there is always a risk. There's an assumption in what you're saying that the same banks are making much less risky business decisions with customer money and pursuit profit. As a rule, they have, because of the way the regulations are set up, savings banks are not allowed to make such speculation things. So they will loan out on individual mortgages and those sort of things. Okay, they'll still do probably a level of fractal banking. Okay, but it's ultimately it's a less risky enterprise than what a merchant investment bank will be doing. Lots of people going for a remastered. Enjoy, Amelia Barrow. Have a nice run. I agree with the policies the idea you're putting forward, but the time is the problem. The time scale. And that's going to be the issue. The time scales are going to be giving people also to set up new bank accounts, redirect all bills, redirect their pay, make sure things work out. It's going to be a nightmare. That's the issue. It's the time. When the banking crisis took place a few years ago, which is what mainly we're basing this off, because that showed the problems with the system, although it hasn't been reformed much since then, despite the many stress tests which have been fudged. The reality was, okay, what can we do? How can we fix this? And the reality is, you can't with the system as it currently is. Because anything you do like that is going to take too long to filter into the system. Excuse me a second. I see a sister trying to lift a heavy object. Sister is not supposed to be lifting heavy objects. To be fair, neither is mother. Neither of them are supposed to be lifting heavy objects. Back in a second. Stop lifting. You'll hurt yourself. I don't know, sisters. I said I'll do it in the morning. I don't have time this evening to move the benches around the garden and free feng shui it for you, or rather pup shui it for you. I don't know. I think, did the Germans understand just how capable the Swordfish was, plus the Germans when designing the FCX, expecting the British to have better stuff than they did? Yes and no. I think a lot of people underestimated just how capable the Swordfish was because it looked old and everyone knew the British were designing new things to come after it. But they also didn't realise the reason the British were having so much trouble designing new things to come after it was because of designing new things to try and meet the same requirements while still being far more advanced as the Swordfish are met. And that's the basic problem. Designing something to meet the Swordfish's ability to drop that torpedo. Because whilst you still presume the torpedo is the most powerful, potent weapon for you to deploy, you'll start thinking of going, okay, let's deploy it in harbour. How are we going to deploy it? Well, you need it to belly flop. As we talked about before. Torpedo! So, Swordfish. When Americans and Japanese drop their torpedo, the Italians and the Germans, when they drop their torpedoes, they go, boom! Okay, they basically do that into the water. When the Japanese and Americans drop their torpedoes, they have wooden fin extenders on them, so they do that. Still going fairly deep. When the British drop their torpedoes from a Swordfish, tension wire on the front as well as fins on the back, and it goes dun and runs along. So it belly flops. That is why the British are able to keep theirs at shallower depth, and which is why they're more likely to hit their targets in harbours, etc. And that's which is why, again, it becomes so much more racking up the numbers in terms of aircraft involvement really does do damage to the Italian fleet in Taranto. But also, there is also the issue, because of the need of the aircraft to fly in that straight line while dropping it, etc., why the Giulio Cesare survives no matter what you do to it, no matter how many aircraft you pump into that scenario, unless you bring up an entire fleet of freaking skewers aboard HMS Ark Royal and dive bomb the thing into frigging nowhere until it's sort of basically smithereens. That is the only way you can get rid of the Giulio Cesare. Giulio Cesare is just too survivable. Mine's what science technology. Alex, say small troop pilots stop being installed in heavy units with the Iron Duke class in the UK. What do you think the impact would be on other nations' fleets? It depends how it affects the speed of the British, but it will probably cause the other fleets to jump up in capability as well. They'll probably start installing small troop boilers as well. You're just looking for an excuse to drop £25 and pick up the remastered edition anyway. I'm innocent. And cute. So, please note the UK has not lost money on the shares taken up when the bank crash in 2008. Nope, it hasn't. But I still expect that some chancellor will come along and sell those off and cause trouble to them, just like Gordon Brown managed to sell off gold when it was cheapest. Actually, we have 2,500 books, and we have 27 boxes. We have 1,000 or so books to go. Excellent. Maximus, if hovercraft had been invented, or rather actually built, because I think I've been over the fact they've been invented before World War II, what impact do you think they could have had on the Normandy landings, the commander raids, and the island hopping campaign in the Pacific? They'd have made them very, very different. Interesting. I'm not sure. They'd have made it far more flexible to get over the coral. There'd been far less of a barrier. But there would have been issues in terms of, whilst those have been less of a barrier, you'd have still had the damage to be able to do onto the hovercraft. So it would be interesting. I do need an intermissions thing. Richards, don't take this the wrong way, and I understand where you get all that sort of idea from, but honestly, I don't believe anyone's actually capable of pulling off one world dominance or anything like that. Honestly, the sheer amount of effort that would have to go into it is obscene. And dive bomb was a sort of dive bomb as well. Well, basically, the Swordfish was a dive bomb because it had its own. Thanks to its biplane construction, any biplane can be pretty much a dive bomb because of the way that biplane sort of its whole aviation scenario works. But yeah, the Swordfish was actually a very accurate dive bomber. You're not as cute as the FRA, so don't try that one on us. What was that about? So, Alex, when the second edition of your book with all the corrections and additions be available to buy? No idea, but they should have it completed and finished off and sent to the printers by the end of the month. An intermission screen with elevator music. If anyone wants to create an intermission screen, I'm always happy to receive it. As we all know, my graphics capability is terrible. My graphics capability is absolutely terrible. This is why, if you look down below, there is such a limited range of things beneath me. But if you go and look, there is actually, I say limited range. There is a few more than I'm actually surprised that some of them do come through as good as they do, considering my own capabilities in these things. So you're going to ask, if the British come on superpower world, is it correct that Turkey couldn't invade Cyprus? Well, they couldn't. They could still invade Cyprus. Whether they'd still be left as a free sovereign country after they did is a completely different matter.
Well, basically, it's the same as anywhere. It's try and get it through a peer review process. You don't have to be don't have to have a doctorate to get a paper published in an academic peer-reviewed journal. It just helps. I could combine it with the shameless book plug. Hopefully, though, my sister is going to stop trying to carry benches around. We can always hope that. We can always hope. You know, you could use that drawing I sent you last year. Potentially. Potentially. There are a few options available. I'll think about it. Any chance for an audiobook of that one? We'll have a chat with the joyous people that are Pen and Sword and see if they fancy doing an audiobook of it. If they do, I'm happy to read it through. Or alternatively, get Drac to read it through. So no, in the British academic system, you have lectures, and what is the practical part called? Small groups. If it's a discussion, it's seminars. If it's lab work, it's called labs. But usually it's seminars and lectures. But you also can have tutorials, which can be 2 or 3 1 or 2, 3, 4 students. Occasionally there are some which are sort of more than that. Some universities have a sort of different sort of approach to tutorials versus seminars. But yeah. It's lectures, seminars, tutorials, labs, drop-in sessions, office hours. Why is she carrying benches around Darkfort? That is the $1,000,000 question. Honestly, she decided she wants to reorganize our garden furniture, and I said I would do it tomorrow. And because I didn't have time today, because for some reason I do lives on a Sunday, and I had everything else going on, so I didn't have time today. And she, rather than leaving for me tomorrow, wanted to get it done at 9:30 at night. Sisters. I've been trying to work out if Turkey would dare invade Cyprus, the Iron as far. The probability is not. If Cyprus is part of a British Commonwealth superpower, then the odds are Cyprus. There is a large Royal Navy, but also a Royal Air Force base sitting there, which might have squadrons from all sorts of things, which is going to just cause trouble because they're immediately. Nicest way you start to invade, there's going to be a huge amount of air power and fleet power deployed against you. How many doctorates are too many? My mother is working on either number 6, 7, or 8 in lottery. I've done one, and that's what I'm limiting myself to at the moment, but I have been considering doing a second. Or rather a postdoc. But it's finding the right university to do a postdoc in. And it's finding the right university that would be happy with the other stuff I do while I'm doing a postdoc, because the trouble is I haven't got a time post for a senior fellowship, but I'm too experienced for a junior fellowship. And whilst I'm interested in postdocs, most of the postdocs in the UK they're structured around things already, so you apply to join that postdoc and do that postdoc. You're not basically saying, look, I want to do a further submission with advice and guidance from a senior academic. And it's working it out. It's working out the scenario. Honestly, the thing I would probably most like always be it would be a year's research fellowship somewhere, just to give me that extra, so I can just drop a whole load of works and just concentrate on this book writing and the research, because I'd like to do a lot of research into the 1920s and 1930s and stuff with Japan. And I think the naval diplomacy of that, which means I'm going to spend a lot of time in the archives in Cambridge and in Oxford. And it's budgeting for that, because at the moment I can budget to go to the ship research archives quite easily. I can budget for that, because I can basically go, right then, I will do this work and that will filter into this book, that will filter into that book, that video, etc. It is not very easy to justify economically. But spending time chasing down the diplomatic wild goose chases that are British and British Anglo-Japanese relationships in the 1920s and 30s, which is why the Anglo-Japanese videos ceased, by the way, because I wanted to go and do primary research, and then I realised the cost of it and working out and justifying it is a completely different matter. Because I might go and do the research and I might find nothing. And I'm not in the stage of my career where I can afford to go and spend 6 months doing research of about 2 to 3 days a week in archives and find nothing. I can't afford that. That would basically financially ruin me and probably mean that I would not be able to go further. I would have to start looking at an alternative career base, i.e. I would probably have to go into... I wouldn't... Again, please note, this is not me saying anything bad about it, because I do a lot of teaching of A-level and GCSE students. But honestly, I would probably have to, instead of working in university, would have to go to a further education college or something like that and teach A-level students to be able to afford to have enough money coming in. And the difference is because that doesn't allocate time for research, that doesn't allocate time for the way that university paid work does. It would then cut into my research work even more, which would mean I'd get even less research, which would mean it would be even less likely of me producing stuff as much as I want to do. And this is the things you have to work out as a junior academic. You do have to work it out. You do have to think it through. The Royal Archives in Japan would be lovely to go to. And again, we do have that there are plans for that. But that would be a very interesting trip to get to. Thanks, Adrian90, and good luck with the PhD in May. Which do I prefer teaching? Naval history, anything. International. I don't mind teaching international maritime law. I'm quite capable of teaching that, and international relations never worry me, but naval history is always my favourite. Military history I do as well quite often. I spend far too much of my life teaching the American Civil War. basically something I always seem to be going off and teaching universities American Civil War. So really, it's not worth bothering for Turkey to invade, correct? Pretty much, yeah. On that scenario. SVB had a suspiciously high number of ex-Lehman Brothers employees who had been the same people who killed that investment bank. Yeah. Always enjoyed a golden parachute. Stafford, I'm loving it, but I would say if Canada's going to become anything, it would be Arctic Command and maybe the sloop capital of Empire, but Arctic Command, and probably that might lead to the RCN investing in nuclear submarines. Honestly, there are some very interesting conversations going on. I don't see it likely as the Canada joining AUKUS. At the moment, there would have to be a major change in Canadian policy and Canadian government thinking for it to happen. But there is a very interesting prospect of Canada joining AUKUS. In terms of, once you think about it, nuclear submarines are a far better fit for Canada than they are for pretty much almost anyone else, because Canada already has a large nuclear industry, a civilian nuclear industry. So a naval nuclear industry could bolt onto that, and therefore would be better. But there's even the problem is then it's a case of we're struggling enough to find space to build the parts we need to find and build for the for the Australian submarines, and with the help of American yards, etc. Supplying Canada as well would just make it even more stretched. You would have to do some actual proper work in the UK and America to build them. And probably it would be the British submarines which would be, again, chosen, because, again, it's the crewing, and this is what people don't seem to get. The big Countess of Virginia, it's a great submarine. It's a lovely submarine. But it requires a lot more crew to operate than the British submarines do. And the British submarines are regressively reducing the crew numbers, in that the current generation are down from the previous generation. Next generation will be even further down than the current generation. And the thing is, the Americans aren't dropping crew down as quickly as they are, because they're not under the same pressure to drop crew as the British and the others the British are. And this is the thing, for the Australians, for the Canadians, who have far small naval services, that smaller crew size, crew is more difficult to find than money. And that's something really weird to say, but crew is more difficult to find than money. So I've just to sign up on Patreon by Romy Mustard. Thank you. Oh. That's right. If you sent the US aircraft in the 1960s operated from two Audacious and three British 1942 Seals to Brits in the late 40s, given they would not be able to not be able to operate them, would they take them apart for the secrets? They'd probably try and figure out how to operate them, but yeah, they would probably, try and take them apart and find their treasure stuff. That's what they probably would do to an extension. They'd probably try a mixture of operating some and take some apart. Rosecrans. Constant Drowse, do you have a favourite US Civil War general? Rosecrans. Old Rosie. I like, in a nice way, don't get me wrong, I like Hewitt, I like Grant, I like Thomason. Thompson is frigging good. Thomas, I mean. And Sherman is one of a kind, but Rosecrans is my favourite. Interesting. My son is going to Japan in May. Heathrow to Poland to Japan. Weird. That sounds fun. You hope to be in Japan in 2024. Well, if you're there at the same... Who knows? Announcements might be coming out. You might find you're there at the same time as certain other people. Richards. Yeah. Well, honestly, actually, you've only got the ones who fight for the army in the Civil War. You've got 6,000 fighting for the South and 50,000 for the North. But there's a further roughly 5,500 Canadians who fight for the US Navy. Or rather serve at various points, it seems, in the US Navy and the US Naval things. A lot of Canadian registered sailors. But the trouble is that's kind of interesting to figure out because there's also a lot of American sailors who are registered as Canadian sailors. So it causes all sorts of funds. Will they call it caucus? That 690 they've got to call it caucus. That's got to be fun. But I think actually what they've gone with is they've gone in alphabetical order. So I think it would become akukus. Akukus? Caucus? Or perhaps it would become the 4I Naval Alliance. I don't know. If I make it to Ottawa, I will take you up on that. The burger barbecue joints. I'm always saying like good in Vietnamese. I couldn't find a decent Vietnamese in London. I was trying to hunt down some pho, but I couldn't find it. Although I was preferring hunting barbecue. And the trouble is, I wasn't close to Bourdain's, which was I found annoying. In the end, I ended up spending a lot of my time in London when I was working out there. Was going into Five Guys, which was kind of disturbing on several levels. The Soviets were a bit ahead of the curve when it came to automating submarines, yes, to an extent. But again, they were suffering similar issues. Theirs was due to their education level. I don't know. How do you rate the Ken Burns series of Civil War? Should love me asking that, given you just expressed regarding teaching the Civil War. It's good, but I actually prefer Bruce Catton's series, and I know it's older, and I know some people don't like it, but I have a soft spot for it because it's really, really good for teaching students. It's a really good overview and a really well written storyline for the history. So it's a history rather than history, if that makes sense. And it's really good for getting students into the Civil War. And I will use Catton's version for teaching GCSE, A level, and uni a lot. And it worked for all of them, and they will all be able to get into it. It causes me to lose books quite regularly because I keep going through different versions of the books because they get nicked by students who go, "Can I borrow this?" I have about 4 different versions of Bruce Catton's series going around somewhere. No, I agree, Justin. Canadians do not want to pay for the work to join AUKUS. At the moment, I have a feeling if in nicest way, if you have Russian bombers or something come flying over the north, or as a Russian submarine turn up in the Northwest Passage, I wouldn't be surprised if things change dramatically. You mentioned crew around USFs. I recall something across, at least with Spain's, they are capable to deploy with half the crew. Have you heard similar? I've heard similar, but the trouble is the official requirements and the actual operational requirements are very different. That's the example I often give is that the the Zumwalt class destroyers, right? They have an automatic boat launching system. And it was explained to me that this is an automated system which requires one person sitting there to watch and launch the boat. But the official boat handling team is a requirement of 4 people. So they have it rated as 4 people. And they always have to have 4 people there watching and giving guidelines, etc. And you sit there and go, that's going to be expensive in the use of personnel. When it gets to submarines, it gets even worse. And some of it is a hangover of the Rickover era, but other things is a hangover of it's the way we've always done it, and we don't have the personal limitations that other navies do have, so we don't need to worry about it at the moment. Honestly, Richards, I'm not sure how to do all that, but I'd say there's potential. But honestly, I had to say I looked into something similar a couple of years ago, and then I decided that frankly it would just cause me too much trouble in other lives, parts of my world to deal with, to not be part of it. So basically, it's kind of like when we had the sort of the vaccine scenario going through with COVID. And I looked and went, yeah, I don't care what other people do. It's make your own choice. It's up to you. It's what goes in your body. But in my case, I sort of have to and will go through it, because if I don't, I've got a mother and sister who have so much problems with their level of immunity because of their asthma, and they are so at risk that as I live with them, and therefore I'm acting as their shield wall between now and the rest of the world, I can't afford not to. So yeah, crew is the reason the US signed up for AUKUS. We're running out of technicians to run the nuclear steam-powered engines. Yeah, at a certain point, the Americans are going to want to use access to British technology in terms of crew reductions. Yeah, I actually found a Vietnamese restaurant in London which didn't serve pho at all. I didn't actually serve it. I went, oh. And the one I found which did look really good was full. And when I say full, I mean people were queuing out the door. And I thought, I'm not going to get dinner for about an hour here. And if I'm lucky, I'm not going to get to the table for at least an hour. And I'm hungry, so I went on. Thanks, Cedra19. No, the problem I can see with all the submarine stuff is that who are you going to get to build it? I don't believe there are enough trained engineers to do the construction work. No, you're going to have to train them. But this is one of the reasons why I'd point out that we are talking on a decade, 2-decade, 3-decade long process. Part of that is going to be training the necessary people to do the construction. That's going to be it. Training the people to do the construction. I do keep trying to add another R. I do. Yes, that's because I have a student who's called Rick Rover. So I keep wanting to call him Rick Rover because I'm so used to saying a Rick Rover rather than Rick Over. So I keep going, Rick, no, it's Rick Over. I don't know, just looked at the Bruce Catton Civil War series. Never seen it before. Thank you for giving me something to watch later on. It's good. Bruce Catton is it's a great series. I think they are available as Well, Bruce Catton himself, I think, is dead. He's dead. He died in 1978. So he actually died a long time before I was born.
And so I do admit it's not the most modern of the trilogies, but it's a really good one. It's a really good one for reading, for people to read it. And Ken Burns' Civil War documentary is based on Catton's books. And there is a Bruce Catton Prize for writing in history. For lifetime achievement in writing in history. Last awarded to David Herbert Donald in 2006. But yeah, he basically wrote a huge amount of stuff on the Civil War, and including some very interesting books on Grant, and was a very good historian. Again, as I said, it's not the most modern of the trilogies, but it's a nice read, and I think there is a. I seem to remember one of my students telling me they got the audiobook version of it, but I don't know how they got the audiobook version of it. But they managed to get the audiobook version of it somehow. How's your late April? The last weekend in April there will be no Bruships because I am again in charge of 150 teenagers. Yay me! No, it's fun. I love it. I do love it. I love Justin Craig. It's a great company to work for, and most of the time it's a great company to work for. It's like any company. There are times when I'm less than happy with them, but that's because and if anything was perfect, it wouldn't be real. But they are a great company. They're a lot of fun, and the kids are pretty cool. And I had a lot of fun. I don't think I posted any pictures to social media of me with my team from last week. But I had 4 great course assistants. I had 2 for the first 3 days and another 2 for the next 3 days, who were all trainees. And I trained them up, and they're really, really good. And yeah, I was fun. I'm at a school in central London. It's where the centre I was running, and it was a really nice centre. It's a really cool school, and it was mostly a lot of fun. There was a few bits of things which were a case of, oh, this is going to be a bit of a slog to get through, but again, it's like any job. And what I laugh is, okay, so you get a budget for the lunch, not lunch, but for the staff room, the biscuits, etc., stuff you put in the staff room for the tutors. And the local shop, the nearest shop to me, so the green one, is Waitrose. And I have to walk past Daunt Books to get there, for starters. So you will have seen a tweet about Daunt Books if you follow me on Twitter. Daunt Books is lovely, and I highly recommend you go to see it in London. It's one of those old-style bookshops. Look it up. It's seriously, if you're in London and you've never been to Daunt Books, go to Daunt Books. You will not be disappointed. It's this really old-fashioned style bookstore with many, many mezzanine levels and all sorts of things, and huge sort of basement area and a whole light illumination section. And it's gorgeous to walk through. But no, I go to a Waitrose as everyone. So you can imagine, if I say Waitrose is a very posh supermarket in the UK, and this is a Waitrose in central London, in a very posh area in central London, you can imagine what the options are. And the amount of tutors who are going, I've never seen this before, and I'm going, no, because there's probably only one supermarket in the country which stocks this stuff. It was fun. Take care, Michael Cooch. Night-night. Sounds cool, History Vanguard. That's right. Would it be correct to assume that an actual Royal Navy Malaya Division flagship would be a cruiser? Yes. Most divisions flagships would be cruisers. Probably light cruisers, depending on who they are. I agree, Richards. You should never do what you don't want to do. You have to make decisions for you and for the situation you deal with. One of the fun things I have is the various organisations I work with, and that requires me to maintain certain things. So, you know, I used to watch the History of Warfare, and they had a good source of Robert Powell. Cool. So, Alex, when do you see the UK US having to build a reliable submarine drone swarms, both to attack Russian SSB and take their attacks? Not anytime soon. The major trouble is communicating underwater. That's the trouble. It's you have the tech to build the small submarines. Yeah, you could do that, but it's the if we look at the trouble that's going on with all these extra large uncrewed undersea vehicles, it's all the tech. Then the issues that are coming out are with communicating and controlling them, and basically how much reliance you're prepared to place in the power of the computers aboard. What is the effect is there on World War One, World War Two, Cold War, and now if geography had made British Isles be 34 miles west of where it is on the map and double its size? If the British Isles had been 34 miles further away from the from Europe and had doubled its size, well, yeah, you probably still have an island nation economy and all those things, but there's even gonna be an even harder argument. It's gonna be a lot harder on the Norman invasion for starters, and even on some of the Viking operations are going to be that harder because the storms in the North Sea are going to be that much rougher. But yeah, it probably doesn't change history that much, but it is going to have an interesting effect on things like the Battle of Britain. It's going to have an interesting effect because you think 34 miles doesn't sound a lot, but that's 68 miles at least added on to any flights overseas, which if your range of your aircraft is 300 miles, that's cut it down, which means your aircraft coming in are going to have that much less fuel when they get here. They'll need that much more longer range to be able to operate the same amount of fuel. For air defence of the UK, that's going to have 34 miles extra of sea. For convoys going around the coast, that's going to provide 34 miles extra of depth for them for aircraft to be intercepted before they get to convoys going around the coast. It's going to provide make the channel that much wider, which is going to make the channel dash more viable, but also going to make building a channel barrier in World War One that much more difficult. 34 miles is a very long distance to add on to that. It'll be interesting, let's say. In World War One, the major effect is going to make the channel barrier is going to need to be stronger. So, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you have all the 12-inch 12-inch dreadnoughts sent down to support and pre-dreadnoughts gathered together to block the channel. You probably need all the 12-inch dreadnoughts. What else? Or alternatively, Queen Elizabeth down there as well, instead of being sent to the Dardanelles. World War II, it's going to have an impact on pretty much everything. Cold War, you're probably going to get far more hydrophones laid down there, because that's going to be a slightly bigger gap. But there again, for air defence again of the UK, you are that much further away. You have that much more security air defence-wise. It's interesting. And for now, well, the question is, would they have actually managed to build the Channel Tunnel under those circumstances? They probably could have done, but it would have taken a lot longer.
and would have had to be a lot bigger in terms of construction capability. You might have actually got a bigger, wider channel tunnel. You might be talking about something which is 4 tracks instead of 2. So 2 twin track tunnels. So 2 tracks going one way, 2 tracks going the other way in each tunnel. It'd be interesting. It would be interesting. The historical population would probably grow as well. Nighttime productions, it would probably grow, and it would have far more space for farming, etc., which would be crucial in World War One and World War Two. But you probably also have stability as well issues, and also it depends on what also doubles in size. Do you still have the same percentage of populations? Also, if it doubles in size, how's that going to affect the climate of the UK? How's that going to affect the viable areas of the UK, river length, etc., the wetlands, the shape and form of the UK? It would be interesting. Daunt books, DAUNT books. You can look them up online. Take care, everyone. Enjoy spending time with family. We always have to pretend to be normal. We can't pretend. They don't like to think that we think about ships all the time. Blackburn Maximus. What was the rank of officer in charge of flotillas and destroyers in World War Two? Usually captain. Sometimes commander, but usually they'd be given the rank. They'd have the rank of captain. And most of the destroyers would be under command of commanders or lieutenant commanders. Good luck, History Vanguard. All books in 37 boxes. Nighttime predictions. Random questions. What could have been done in terms of projects chosen and decisions by government to keep British aviation still nationally strong, other than things like ignoring the specs given by BOC for things like VC-10? Keep steel production strong. You need to provide a good reason to be building more steel in the UK. So you need to keep the car industry, shipbuilding industry, and probably railway line industry going. So you need to replace railway lines and build more railway lines probably at some point. You need to provide reasons for these things to keep going. So you need to incentivize them. I would say maybe on manufacturing and industrial companies like that, you have things which are produced in the UK, as long as they're produced using British steel, on their components, don't have to pay as much tax or anything. So just cut the tax to incentivize building more and make it more cost effective. So they can, they have an advantage with competing with outsiders. Oh yeah, going back further in that scenario, would the Romans have one found out Britain existed? Yes. 2 actually have tried invading it. More than likely, they're the Romans. But it would have been big enough, it would have been interesting. Stephen Clarke, and a 4-mile ECH extended Louis Blériot clashes in the sea in 1909? Potentially. Guys, does World War I even happen with king-size UK versus Germany? I presume Germany would still be building up a fleet, so it could still potentially happen. Like drop tanks. I think the Germans do have something they're working on in World War II, which would be drop tanks. But the British get there first, and then the Americans get in there and actually mass produce them. The British get there first because the British are trying to deal with things like the Spitfire. If New Zealand was on the Atlantic Ridge, in Blackburn Maximus, it would provide a very interesting problem in the middle of the Atlantic. A very interesting problem. Probably not 960 wrong. And coming us, by the end of the war, they had a paper drop tank, which you dropped only in case of him engaging, since it had a fuel pump in it, i.e. still expensive. Yeah, it's weird. Hello, Paul Thomas. No worries. Paul Thomas, try Discord. That's DMs on Discord is the best way. You can, if you go to the server link down below, you can usually find me in there and DM me stuff. And I tend to respond. It takes a while sometimes for me to respond, because sometimes I mean to respond and then I forget to respond. Or I think I've responded. Or alternatively, I think I'll respond once I gather more information, then I get distracted by something and I forget to go back over the information. Then I go back and look at it a week later and go, oh, frig it, I forgot to respond. And sometimes I just seem to get the messages late that I need to respond. That's right. At what point in history did ironclad battleships become obsolete? Probably, I wouldn't say the launch of Royal Sovereign, but probably by the launch of HMS Repulse of the Royal Sovereign class. There are issues. There are now enough that they cannot just win by daunt of numbers. Take care, Brzezowski. I'm probably only going to do 3 hours because I don't know if you realise it, notice it, my voice is starting to go because of the whole day of family parties, family things, and doing this. And we've got more coming up because we're doing stuff for my sister's birthday this week, so I will probably be doing 3 hours, so there's probably going to be only another 10 minutes. I'll say that now. And then we'll be still here in about 40 minutes time. But I'm just going to say, we're going to only do another 10 minutes. Another 10 minutes. Stop in the name of my voice, basically. So far today, we haven't managed to get to see any books because we've just been dealing with so many cool questions. I'm not going to get them out in the next 10 minutes. So, yeah, it's going to say listed as random books on the shelf, but sorry we never got the books. We always had questions. You're designing new merchant ships for replenishing the British merchant marine. What would you go for? Nicely around. Now, roll-on, roll-off ships. Probably at the moment. And I wouldn't say no to some container vessels, and I wouldn't say no to some tankers. So that's what I'm probably needing. Tankers, I would want both smaller ones that small quick ones I could do a run across the North Sea with, and large ones I can bring the fuel around from the rest of the world. No, just keep saying, I'm going to show you keep saying only 10 minutes more every 5 to 7 minutes. Hi Daniel Politics, how you doing? Yeah, we'll see. I think I will have more iron brew because I deserve it. I deserve it. I ate the food. A Yorkie bar is a chocolate bar. If you could build a Ro-Ro container combined ships, that'd be a good one, but I would actually just say both those ships. Ooh, I spent a day with RFA stats. I blame your videos on logistics. Yeah, honestly, Everything comes down to logistics. There is no point having something and then not being able to supply it. There is just no point. I have this debate with people far too often. People go, but this is a really cool weapon system. And I go, can they supply it? No? Well, then it's no point having it, is there? It's my main argument whenever someone tells me, goes around, it's the size of the British Army is terrible. And I go, yes, who are you comparing it to? This and this. Well, yes, how much of the British Army can actually be deployed around the world? And how much of that army can be deployed around the world? Well, you can employ this. Yeah. Just wish we funded them all properly. Just wish we did. Can I ask something, because it's just flashed up in my viewpoint? Is Jack Black in The Mandalorian now? Actually, what would a British SSBN tender ship look like? Why are you building one? That will tell you what it'll look like. Are you building one to provide a permanent base for the ships, for the submarines to top down to Falkland Islands? In which case, it's going to be a massive store ship with accommodation block on. Or is it an emergency supply ship? Okay, then it's going to be far smaller. It's not going to need the same level of machine shops, etc. It's only for dealing with emergencies. Is it? I don't know. What's its purpose? And by the way, if it's a vessel which is going to be basically a semi-permanent base you're setting up in the Falkland Islands, you're probably going to need multiple ships, because you're going to need one to sort of one to act as tender to the submarines and one to act as basically support system to the missiles. And you're going to need a floating dry dock or something down there as well to take the submarines out of the water and now inspect them. Now, do you have the EHH Archibald books on the fighting ships Royal Navy, 897 to 1984? Some of them. Jack Black is in Mando, Season 3, Episode 5. Oh, good lord. I might actually have to watch The Mandalorian now if Jack Black's in there, because Jack Black is one of the few actors I actually rate. I was having an interesting conversation with someone the other day, and they were surprised that I knew that Daniel Radcliffe's girlfriend was an actress with the surname, I think, Darkey or something. And I went, yeah, because I have cousins who are fans so I picked up stuff from them. And I went, oh, that's interesting, because usually, as a rule, when any people modern people, you have no idea who they are, because as far as you're concerned, people worth bothering with end in about 1970. And I go, that's wrong and incorrect. People who are worth bothering with end in about 1990. I do take notice of more recent people, because I have to teach, but I like the joke. It's just I don't pay any attention to actors and actresses at all. I just don't. It's terrible. And sometimes I am literally watching programs, and I'll chat and go, this is good. My family will turn around and go, yeah, it's got the actor in you like. You always watch their programs. And I'm going, I have no idea who that person is. I just about know who Jack Black is, though, because Jack Black was in one of the funniest movies of all time, School of Rock. So I learnt Jack Black's name. I will probably have to look at. Look, nicest way. If it's got Jack Black in it, it's going to be funny. That's what I'm watching it, presuming it's a comedy. So if Jack Black's in it and it's not, it's a comedy as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't watch the entire rest of anything else. Mainly because I don't tend to. It's a terrible thing, but I've noticed recently that I've stopped watching some of the some new series. I watch things like Oh, what's it? Nathan. Is it Nathan Fillion's? I think he is called. I seem to remember reading an article about it. But the guy was who I remember always as the guy from Firefly, who is now in a program called The Rookie, which I quite enjoy and find pretty darn cool because it tends to have a level of comedy in it, which I find appropriate for real life because real life is not super serious the whole time. There is comedy in there. If you ever work for your day, there are going to be points you're laughing, and points you're serious. And the trouble is with programs, they're either super serious or they are, they are like humour, and reality is somewhere in between. In terms of Cold War, why was the US behind the certain areas? Why do you presume the US has to be ahead in every area? It's going to depend on your investment priorities where you're ahead in. So, don't presume. The problem is you're asking why is America not ahead in all areas? It's because the Americans are investing in other areas and the Russians are investing in some areas, and the Americans are investing in other areas, and some of those areas match up and there is competition. Some of those areas are completely divergent and they're investing in different sections. And it's going to give you the perception of they're behind or they're in front, and they're not. They're just investing in different areas. It's not a case of behind or in front, it's a case of their investments are different. Their priorities are different due to their circumstances, their geostrategic position. Why do free navies all developing naval aviation come with three completely different doctrines, there's different design modus operandi compromises under the treaty system for their aircraft carrier designs, and three different, completely different doctrines for their aircraft development? Why? Because they have different geostrategic and different cultural and scenario focuses, and therefore invest differently. And that is what happens. That's the reality. It doesn't make anyone more advanced than the others. It makes they've invested differently. And you find out through the crucible of warfare who's perhaps invested more correctly than others, because everyone will have made mistakes in their investment, but the question is who's made less mistakes in terms of their judgment of how they're going to fight a war. Not in case of have they made a mistake in terms of producing something less capable, but does the war turn out as they were predicting, and has it therefore validated their investment? And if the war doesn't turn out as they were predicted, then it won't validate their investment, and their investment will be wrong. Which is one of the reasons why it becomes very interesting when you're starting to argue about naval aviation in World War II, because people go, well, look at the battles in the Pacific. The Americans were right, therefore the Americans produced the best air defense, best carrier naval aviation. You go, yeah, they're right to an extent, yes. But there again, the British operations in the Mediterranean, etc., validate the British methodology. And the fact is, as you can see it, there's emerging towards the end of the British and American methodologies, but there's also the fact there's the British methodology would probably have still worked okay in the American scenario, and the American methodology would have worked okay in the Indian Ocean and the North Atlantic and those scenarios, but would have had real problems in the Mediterranean. But the British would have had would have had to completely change. Would have also had to change the way they were fighting for their methodology to work in the Pacific. They would have not wanted to have the big daylight engagements. They'd wanted to have nighttime attacks with aircraft and night strikes to weaken the enemy force before they had a daylight engagement. It's a completely different operational scenario. And that's the thing. The Americans fought it differently with far bigger strikes and far more likelihood of winning because they can find them in daylight and strike them in daylight. Whereas the British are going to rely on night strikes. And that's why it makes Operation C and the whole stuff with the Japanese foray into the Indian Ocean so interesting, because that's a scenario where if it had happened, if the British had a night strike, it turned out like that, you could have seen a very interesting, different perspective come on World War II. As well as changing a lot of the successive battles that happened, because if the Japanese had lost carriers in the Indian Ocean raid, that would change how they'd handle it, would change the battles, and would have changed the entire war structure. Thank you. Georgian, concerning Jack Black and School of Rock, we all agree to disagree. No, School of Rock is just funny. It's not my funniest movie of all time. The funniest movie of all time, oh, it's got to be Penguins of Madagascar or Zootropolis for me. Those are the ones that make me laugh non-stop. But no, Jack Black, School of Rock. Because you see, having worked in various schools, in various scenarios, I could see that happening. And that's what made it so funny to me. He was very good in Tropic Thunder, yes. Fillions, the rookie is based on a real person, yes. It is. Nice one. What do you think a 1990s Buccaneer Model Mark 10 would if you designed it look like? Probably not much. Probably better avionics, but pretty much the shape of the existing Buccaneer. Yeah, I am gonna start saying goodbye in a second. I'm just gonna answer questions. I'll finish all the questions, then I'll go. It's Laurel Hardy film. Always a nice one to go with. Yeah, Stafford. I always say family before everything else, but 8 hours round trip drive and being up at 5 a.m. when it's currently 5:20 p.m. That sounds like a very interesting way to not have any sleep. Depends. How well will you function tomorrow based off caffeine consumption alone? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say with Jack Black, that's probably him and the others in the movie taking a shot at other people. That's not the thing they do, but it's a shot they will take at other people who do it in their industry. But, you know. So, being a Monday where my manager will be fresh from his vacation, not that functional. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there are much stronger, more effective, less legal options than caffeine. Is said brother going to be paying for said options? What ironclad we say is the relevant longest? I think HMS Warrior probably had the longest life. In terms of viability life. Warrior herself, because again, her size allows them to upgrade. This is the thing about larger ships. People often go, oh, big ship expensive, build lots of small ships. The trouble is, big ships probably tend to stay relevant and viable for a lot longer than small ships. Why? Because you have the space to upgrade them. A small ship, you want to add something in, you got to take something out. A big ship, sometimes you don't have to take something out. Or sometimes you can just rearrange stuff. Big ship gives you space. Alright. Pretty much 96 everyone. That would probably be the biggest trip. So, it's Bank Holiday Monday for me in the UK tomorrow, which means I am building furniture, or rebuilding the house, or clearing out the garage, or doing all three.
So I will now say thank you very much to everyone, and it is time to stop. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Anouk. Thank you, 96831. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Scooters. Thank you, George. Thank you, Richards. Thank you, Carmen Gasberg. Thank you, Mr. Serenity Zen. Thank you, Daniel Politics. Thank you, Melanie64. Thank you, Stafford, Melanie, Glyn, Seneca, and I think Dan was also on here at one point for adminning. Thank you very much this evening. And Sean. I think also he might have been popped in. Thank you, George. Thank you, History Vanguard. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Anouk. Thank you, Night Heron Productions. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Joss Vonk. Thank you, Tanif. Thank you, Blackburn Maximus. Thank you, Malaga. Thank you, Anouk. Thank you, Night Heron Productions. Thank you, Runon. Thank you, Amelie. Thank you, Juicy Sushi. Thank you, Sijin. Thank you, Colin. I think I said thank you too, but I would say thank you again. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for your super chats. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for all the support you give the channel. It really wouldn't be what it is without you, and it really wouldn't have got any without you. And this is a reminder again. Let me open it up. Did it? Of the winners of the Patreon. If I can... The winners of the Patreon this month are Paul from Chicago's Red Storm Rising, Cold War Conflict 1980, NATO Doctrine, and Anticipated Outcome of Conventional GUIK Naval Conflict. Please note he said conventional, so I will be sticking to conventional. And I thought Danny Wright might get it, but it turned out it was Carl Hanshaw. With the RN keeps control of the fleet air arm, how would have changed RN carrier operations in World War II? So we're going right back to 1918 and April Fool's Day 1918, and we're changing the scenario. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Paul Emmis. Thank you, David Goulding. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And take care. Toodles, and have fun.